So mini PCs, I mean, they naturally have a small footprint. And today we're going to be taking a look at a new mini PC dubbed as the world's smallest AMD Ryzen PC. I don't know if this is for sure the world's smallest, if they qualify for a Guinness Book World Record, but we're going to be taking a look at the Aerofara Tank56. So there are a couple configurations being sold for this PC as far as RAM and hard drive size goes. But the one I have here today has 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is split between two 8 gigabyte SODIMM DDR4 sticks, and then it has a 500 gigabyte PCIe NVMe M2 SSD. Internally, you are able to add a 2.5 inch SSD to expand your storage. I'll show you the insides in a moment. So this package, it's fairly basic. Comes with your PC, the power supply, and a VESA mount, and not much else. The PC does come preloaded with Windows 11 Pro and has a AMD Ryzen 5 5600U CPU with 12 threads across 6 cores and a max turbo clock rate of 4.2 gigahertz with an integrated Radeon RX Vega 7 GPU. So this APU version is a fairly recent release. It did come out in 2021, so it's not too old. Definitely a capable little setup here. So it can support up to 3 displays at once at 4K 60 Hz with its 2 HDMI ports and its 1 USB-C port that supports video output. We also get a total of 4 USB 3.0 ports with 2 on the front and 2 on the back. We also have a 3.5 millimeter audio port for your headphones, your speakers, whatever you want to use, mic, that kind of thing. We also have gigabit Ethernet port with an addition I don't see too often on these types of mini PCs, a micro SD card slot on the side. And I find that extremely convenient. So in order to open this PC and expose the motherboard, you just have to remove the screws from under the rubber feet and then push through the power button. This will allow you to add another hard drive or upgrade the RAM fairly easily if you want. Now to note, the included RAM and SSD are both Kingston branded, so that's a nice thing. Not some weird generic stuff going on here. So while I know people have plenty of uses for a PC like this, I'm sure a lot of my viewers on the channel here would prefer to know how well it plays games. I mean, as far as productivity goes, for sure, you're not going to have issues with some basic editing, rendering videos to a certain degree. Your spreadsheets will spread just fine. Now, watching 4K movies and YouTube, that was buttery smooth for me. No problems with the system slowing down or stuttering. Everything loaded just fine. I mean, this little PC, it mostly works just as well for those things I just listed as my main PC. But to note, rendering videos if you're into YouTube and stuff like that will be a bit slower than a more powerful desktop, obviously. But everything else here was okay from my experience as far as basic uses go. But gaming, how well does this thing do? I think many people, they do like these small form factor PCs to have like a simple console-like experience when it comes to having like emulation builds and PC games set up on a thing like this. And you really shouldn't expect the performance of a high-end gaming PC. I mean, that's a given. But this thing definitely has a lot of potential. So throwing at it some emulation and PC games, I wanted to share some footage and give some thoughts of my tests here, obviously. So one of the first things I tossed at it was the PS3 emulator, RPCS3. I tried out one of my favorites, Lollipop Chainsaw. Now, to note, with each of these emulators that I test out in this video, these were just basic installs. I didn't search out mods, hacks, or special settings or anything. I didn't change anything at all. Only things that I did was, if needed, I installed a BIOS or firmware and set up my controls. That was it. Just downloaded the emulator and played the game. So while I think all the games I played performed fairly well, I'm sure taking the time to optimize the emulator and settings can definitely benefit the experience. So I think most of the stuff I emulated here seemed to run fairly well, and I didn't really see the need to tweak things for this video. I just wanted to show them running in the most basic way possible to give you a decent idea of what this PC is capable of. But let's get back to the Lollipop Chainsaw. So the game, it played just as well as my Steam Deck, it seemed. Mostly 30 FPS with only a few instances of slight dips that wasn't really noticeable to me while playing. Now, if you're hoping GameCube and Wii play well on here, you will be happy to know I had no issues, so that's a plus. I mean, I did kind of figure GameCube and Wii would be fine, but what I was really curious about was WiiU. So I have very limited experience emulating the WiiU because I haven't really had a need to in the past, but I did get set up quickly with the CMU emulator and jumped right into some games. So while this emulator does need to compile new shaders from time to time, I didn't notice any real issues with performance. Playing Super Mario 3D World was awesome. It seemed to run flawlessly here. So, okay, some higher end stuff works great with emulation. Obviously, no point testing out older stuff, taking up time. Everything up to PS2 will mostly be fine here, but always keep in mind, with performance, it can vary game to game, and you could find issues that are just game specific, or maybe you have a bad rip of a game, or the emulator you are using needs some tweaks to the settings to get the best performance out of it. I can never say everything will run 100%. It's just not possible to guarantee and make a claim like that. So keep that stuff in mind. So moving on, let's get into some PC games real quick. Now, this is not a gaming PC, but it has some capabilities to play quite a few things. Just keep your expectations in check, all right? So older games, 2D games, a lot of indie stuff should run fairly well here, but I mostly wanted to focus my attention on some more recent releases. Now, I like checking out games from Microsoft as they seem to do a really good job of auto-configuring the graphics settings to what your PC can actually handle. So that's always something I like to look at here. Now, Halo Infinite, it ran fantastically well in my opinion. Fairly steady 30 FPS, sometimes getting closer to 40. Maybe downscaling things, making a few other tweaks could improve that, but I felt playing the single-player campaign, gotta make note, single-player campaign this way is definitely playable. I probably wouldn't want to play, online that way, but 30 FPS, single-player, hey, it works and it's playable. Now, moving on to Forza Horizon 5, this one I always run on systems like this, and people will, they typically will make fun of my driving, and that's okay. I'm not great at this game. I'm not trying to impress anyone, but I do this on purpose. I like to drive through a bunch of terrain, for a reason. I want to see with all the physics and collisions going on and objects loading in if the performance will see any kind of major dips. Just driving carefully on the smooth road doesn't really give me an indication of the entire picture of performance. So, obviously, these newer games are running on mostly low settings, but they still look pretty good to me. With Forza, I was happy to see our FPS was getting over 30. With it typically hitting the higher end of the 30s, going into the 40s at times, it ran fairly smooth and is definitely playable. Now, I also wanted to try out Demon Slayer. So with this game, it seems like I forgot I had 60 FPS set to on in the frame limiter for the game. And I was having a little bit of slowdown, it appeared. But once I made a few tweaks, set it to 30 FPS, the game ran just fine. Now, one I didn't have too much hope for, but I still wanted to try anyway, was Death Stranding. And yeah, I've played through this game multiple times since it launched, and I've grown very fond of it. It's one of the more memorable games I've played in years, so the more I can play it on, the better type of thing. But I'm not too disappointed if it doesn't run great on a mini PC, as I have so many other options to play it. But the game does in fact run here. But there's some asterisks, I guess you would say. On low settings, while I think that, graphically it looks alright, the FPS is a little all over the place. Sometimes hitting the low 20s or slightly below. The in-game engine cutscenes and actual gameplay, you could see a solid 30 FPS at times, but it's not consistent. In rendered cutscenes, you will have a solid locked 60 FPS, but that's not how the game runs while playing normally. But I wanted to mention that just in case some of the footage here showed a locked 60, so you would know what was going on. Those are pre-rendered cutscenes. Now, overall, I think this world's smallest Ryzen mini PC is a solid option for specific uses. Setting up an arcade machine, virtual pinball, a gaming console, just kind of having your expectations in check, for sure, why not? Just understand that, it's capable of some mid-level PC gaming, fairly solid with emulation, but you won't get the same level of performance as a well-built gaming desktop. Just isn't happening. If you're interested, link down below. Thanks for watching. Appreciate y'all. Bye.